This after the first ever direct attack by Iran on Israel, firing close to 200 ballistic missiles at cities like Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, even a military base in the southern Negev desert on Tuesday night. Now, back in April too, Iran had fired a whole bunch of projectiles, many of them drones, some of them ballistic missiles, about 300 of them, but much of those were intercepted by Israel's air defense systems. But by doing what it did last night, on Tuesday night, Iran has conveyed to Israel that it can hit Israel at a time and place, and most importantly, a capability or a degree or an extent of its own choosing. Now the big question is, how will Israel respond to this unvarnished direct attack by Iran on Israeli soil? It's not a question of if, because Israel can ill afford to be in this Hobson's choice, to be in this dilemma whether or not to respond to Iran. It has to, and it has to be seen to be responding to Iran. The question is not of if, the question is simply of when and how will Israel respond. What are the objectives here? Will Israel attack one of Iran's nuclear facilities? Because that would be a body blow. Remember, for the last 10, maybe even 15 years, Iran has been pursuing a nuclear weapon. That they believe would be the ultimate crossing of the Rubicon. That would level out the asymmetry of defense capabilities between Tehran and Tel Aviv. Could Israel target one of Iran's many nuclear facilities? Will it prefer to attack the top Iranian leadership, call for regime change? Remember, Netanyahu had put out a video a couple of nights ago in which he spoke directly to the Iranian people and how they deserved a better leadership. Because in Israel's response to the Iranian attack on Tuesday night, to the Iranian ballistic missile barrage, how Israel chooses to respond to that, we will then be able to see the future course of this war. But first, let's bring you up to speed with the various options that Iran had, and it seems like it has chosen the first, most direct option, which is a direct line of attack at Israel. The recent killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah has heightened tensions in the Middle East. Iran is now faced with a critical decision regarding how it's going to shape its response to Israel. The options before Tehran are diverse. It ranges from direct military action to leveraging proxy forces like Hezbollah and the Houthis. But the consequences for each of these options will also have to be carefully weighed upon. On Crux Decode, we break down what options Iran has to strike back at Israel. Will it prefer to use its proxies or get drawn into a direct conflict with Tel Aviv? Or will it play the waiting game to see the end of the Gaza war and then strike back at Israel at a time and place of Iran's choosing, perhaps post the US elections in November? Iran could opt for a direct strike against Israeli targets. This would involve using advanced missile technology or even drones to inflict significant damage. They did something similar to this back in the summer when hundreds of Iranian drones attacked the Israeli heartland. But most of these drones were intercepted or they were taken down by Israel's air defense systems. However, this approach, a direct attack on Tel Aviv or Haifa or other major Israeli cities, it carries with it huge risks, including a potential escalation into a broader regional conflict. Iranian leaders are aware that such an action could provoke a robust Israeli counter-response. If Iran decides to respond to the Israeli strike, which took out the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah last week, it might not have to pull its punches like it did the last time. Tehran's telegraphed barrage against Israel last time, which was back in April, was written off by many as a failure. But Iran does have quite a few arrows in its quiver should its standoff with Israel continue to escalate further. Experts say that Iran has more sophisticated weaponry at its disposal. It can bring in its proxies into the fight, and unlike its attacks in the past, Tehran can utilize the element of surprise. And of course, there is the ultimate threat, which is officially activating its long-suspected effort to develop a nuclear weapon. Could Iran bring a nuclear weapon into question? Will Tehran go that far? The other option, and a more likely scenario in this case, would involve Iran using its network of proxies. Groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis are well positioned to conduct operations against Israel without directly dragging in Tehran. This allows Iran to maintain plausible deniability while at the same time retaliating effectively, even though everyone in the Middle East knows that Hezbollah is merely a proxy for the Khamenei regime in Iran. There's also covert operations. Iran may choose to conduct covert operations aimed at Israelis and Israeli interests abroad. This could include intelligence operations. It could also include targeted assassinations, which would be less visible than open warfare, but it would still serve as a form of retaliation. It can also hurt Israel and the world community by stepping up the attacks in the Straits of Hormuz and blocking the international sea lanes, particularly making the Red Sea lanes difficult for commercial and military ships to access. This will extract a heavy price on global shipping and commerce. And then, of course, there is the ultimate threat, which is highly unlikely, but Iran could escalate its nuclear program as a form of retaliation. This would signal that any attack on Iranian soil could lead to severe consequences, including a potential nuclear response against Israel. Now, analysts say it is common for Tehran to hold off on any direct or indirect action in a bid to avenge Nasrallah's death until it can determine a decisive course of action. But if Iran does choose to respond militarily, as it did back in April for the killing of 7 members of the IRGC, or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that was a strike that happened on the Iranian embassy in Damascus. Iran blamed Israel for that strike, and then it unleashed hundreds of drones and other unmanned aerial vehicles into Israeli airspace. If Iran chooses to do that, it can take things much further than what it did back in April. While the prospect of direct conflict does exist, it is not the most probable outcome. Iranian leadership has historically favored what they call asymmetric warfare, using its proxies to try and avoid a full-scale war, which Iran may not be prepared for at this time, unlike Israel, which is already knee-deep in war for the better part of the last 1 year, first against Hamas and now over the last 2 or 3 weeks against Hezbollah. Also, the ongoing ceasefire negotiations involving 6 parties, including Egypt, Qatar, the United States, Israel, and of course Hamas, that could also complicate options for Iran. Iran may prefer to wait for a more opportune moment to strike without disrupting the ceasefire talks. Iran is a strategic actor playing for the long run, and it's not going to make any suicidal moves just yet. Its economic situation is still poor. It is still recovering from American sanctions as well as the COVID pandemic. It also understands it now has a window of opportunity before the elections happen in the United States in November. The Iranians fear former US President Donald Trump and him returning to the White House. They would rather prefer to see the Democratic candidate and the current Vice President Kamala Harris come back to the White House. This may steer them away from the currently escalating situation vis-a-vis Israel. Donald Trump in the White House means more support for Israel. Tehran's understanding and its belief is that America is the economic gateway to the rest of the world, and other countries will follow America's lead. Trump will only make things hard for the Iranians. Harris, who is slightly pro-Palestinian, at least understands the cost of the human crisis that has been unleashed in Gaza and may try to be a little harder on the Netanyahu regime. Therefore, the Iranians feel that the news against Tehran might loosen it just a bit if there's going to be a Democrat in the White House, and that could potentially give them some breathing space. The death of Hassan Nasrallah represents a significant blow to Hezbollah and its operational capabilities. Nasrallah was not just a charismatic leader, but also a strategic thinker who guided Hezbollah through numerous conflicts with Israel. His absence creates a leadership vacuum that could affect Hezbollah's decision-making and thereby limit Iran's capabilities at retaliating against Israel. Without Nasrallah, Hezbollah may experience delays in planning and its ability to execute retaliatory strikes against Israel. This disruption could weaken the immediate response capabilities of Hezbollah. The question of succession is also crucial for Hezbollah's future. Potential successors include figures like Sheikh Naim Qasim, whose proof of life itself is shaky to start with, or other senior commanders within the organization like Nasrallah's cousin, Hashim Safieddine, who is a member of Hezbollah's highest decision-making body, the Shura Council. However, any of these individuals will lack Nasrallah's authority and his charisma, which could lead to further internal strife within Hezbollah. Iran's response to the killing of Hassan Nasrallah will likely involve careful calculations aimed at balancing its retaliation on the one hand with the desire to avoid any broader regional conflict. While direct military action remains an option, leveraging proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis seems to be more probable given the current geopolitical tensions. The loss of Hassan Nasrallah complicates matters for Hezbollah but does not eliminate its capacity for retaliation. The coming weeks will be critical in determining how Iran and its allies choose to navigate this tense situation. All right, let's try and make sense of what happened last night between Iran and Israel. The barrage of rocket attacks, almost 180 plus of them, targeting major Israeli cities, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, even the southern Negev desert. How will Israel now respond? That is the million-dollar question. Gideon Levy is one of Israel's most famous authors and journalists. Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasar is a former chief research division of the IDF. Professor Fouad Izadi is associate professor with the Tehran University. Yossi Beilin is former minister in the Israeli government, and Michael Rubin, senior fellow with the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. Let me start with you, Mr. Gideon Levy. Help our viewers make sense of what happened last night, what happened on Tuesday night, the barrage of rockets. Yes, there's been minimal damage, I believe one fatality in the West Bank. Was Iran trying to convey a signal to Israel and perhaps to the United States and its partners that, look, they have the capability to hit Israel, but they do not want to escalate further than what they did already last night?
I couldn't phrase it better than this. It was mainly aimed to Iran's partners, to Iran's proxies. Iran couldn't stay passive after all the last events, and it had to show something, but they didn't cross their lines in the way that it leaves still some kind of possibility of preventing a regional war. But I'm afraid that we are on the edge of a regional war, because Israel will retaliate now, and then we are in this vicious circle which will lead us to a regional war.
Brigadier General Kuperwasar, is a regional war now inevitable? Does Israel not have options other than to climb the escalatory ladder, other than to directly respond to Iran's challenge yesterday, the barrage of rocket attacks? How do you think Israel will respond to what happened last night?
Well, there are all kinds of options before Israel that can choose from all kinds of things. But I agree with Mr. Levy that Israel is going to retaliate, and is going to retaliate and charge a price. Because unlike Mr. Levy, I don't think that this was just a move in order to please the spectators and the allies of Iran. This was 180 missiles flying over our heads in order to kill us. That was the purpose. We managed to intercept many of them, and we had some luck in the sense that we didn't have casualties, but the purpose was to kill Israelis. And therefore, there's no other way for Israel but to retaliate. And I think it's going to be something that's going to be painful for the Iranians, probably something to do with the Iranian nuclear program. That is very close to allowing the Iranians to have considerable arsenal of nuclear weapons within a year. This is something very dangerous, and somebody has to stop it.
So let me ask Michael Rubin, how easy or difficult is that going to be if Israel makes the strategic calculation that the best response to what happened last night was to target Iran's nuclear facilities? How easy or difficult would that be for Israel to execute on its own? And if it does so, then would America have to inevitably get dragged into this potentially regional war?
Certainly, it will be difficult for Israel, but it's doable, and the Israelis have shown that it's doable with by precise attacks in Isfahan last April. But here's the thing: if the Israelis go in with surprise, once they drop their ordnance, they're not going to have surprise on the way out. And therefore, the Israelis are going to want to go after command and control anti-aircraft air batteries, enemy airfields, and then you're talking, according to retired Air Force General Chuck Wald, who led the U.S. air campaign on Afghanistan, about 1,300 sorties. The nightmare situation for the Americans, of course, is that the Israelis will start something, but then not finish it. When you have a hornet's nest, you have two good options. One is to leave it alone. The other is to get rid of it. But the worst possible option is to sit underneath it, lightly tapping it with a stick.
So what does that mean? That if Israel makes this strategic calculation, and I believe there is still some distance to be covered before they come to that conclusion, but if they make this calculation that the best way to respond to Iran's barrage of rockets last night is to hit the nuclear facilities, you're saying that's akin to stirring up a hornet's nest, and the Israelis will not be able to, they may be able to strike, but they may not be able to withdraw.
No, what I'm saying is that Israelis are capable of doing it, but it's a complex operation. That said, it's easy enough to do. The thing is, while in Iraq in 1981, there was one target, and the Syrian plutonium processing plant was also one target in 2007, the Iranian program is spread around, and Iran, of course, is 4 times the size of Iraq. Now, you've got a situation where the Israelis can do this.
Okay.
The only good side is that the facilities buried under mountains, you don't need to destroy them. You only need to destroy the entrances.
Okay, so let me ask Yossi Beilin, who's a former minister in the Israeli government, do you agree with that after the pretty dramatic events that we had overnight Tuesday going into Wednesday, the ballistic missile barrage by Iran, the question then is, how is Israel expected to respond? The view of 2 out of the panelists who I spoke to just now, they seem to suggest that attacking Iran's nuclear facilities would be the way to go as far as Israel is concerned if they want to cause maximum strategic damage. What is your view?
We are looking at this battle like a battle of gladiators. Once Iranians are hitting us, now the question is when and how we are going to retaliate. Then the question will be when and how they will go to retaliate, and we might have, God forbid, a regional war. In order to do what exactly? It's so stupid and so unneeded. So the question is the following one. Is the United States going to do something about it? The United States is supporting Israel, understands that what the Iranians are doing is totally crazy, crazy. And that they are really the enemies, the enemy of the Democrats in the world, and not only the Democrats. And the question is whether it is possible. Maybe not, but I'm asking it. I'm asking myself, I'm asking the Americans, if there is a possibility now to do something about a general agreement with Iran vis-a-vis Hezbollah, maybe also vis-a-vis Hamas, although their relations with Hamas are not exactly like the relations with Hezbollah, which is its satellite. In order to pacify the region, there is a possibility.
So, is there a possibility of an agreement? I'll come to that in 1 second, but I think the consensus view seems to be, and let's get a view from Iran. Let's get a view from Tehran. Professor Vowed Izadi is at the Tehran University. He's now joining us. So, the consensus view seems to be that Israel certainly will do something and be seen as doing something, whether it is targeting the nuclear facilities, some kind of oil facilities, perhaps the headquarters of the IRGC. We don't know in what form or shape Israel's response will be. But if it does so, Professor Izadi, what is your concern? What is the prevailing mood in Tehran right now? Are they bracing for some kind of a direct confrontation by Israel? And if it so happens, then how does one contain it? Because such a thing has not happened in many, many years now.
Well, people are celebrating on the streets. So if you come to Tehran or any other city in Iran and you hang around the cities, you don't see any concern. You see people sort of giving each other sweets, waving Palestinian flags, waving Lebanese flags, waving Iranian flags. And one reason Iranian government responded to Israeli attacks was because of this public opinion pressure on the government. When Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran, Americans sent a message to the Iranian government saying that a ceasefire was near, and they asked Iran not to respond.
Okay.
Under Article 51 of UN Charter, if your country is attacked, you have a right to respond to that attack. So Iran waited a couple of months. Not only a ceasefire didn't come, Israelis assassinated Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah Secretary General. They killed more than 2,000 people in Lebanon.
Okay.
They increased the number of the people who were killed in Gaza. It's over 42,000 now. And they wanted to have a ground operation against Lebanon. They wanted to go inside the Lebanese territory.
Okay, so let me ask Gideon Levy. So then the question, Mr. Levy, is, I mean, up until a few weeks ago, maybe last month, the view in Israel seemed to be that Benjamin Netanyahu is stretching this war for his own political purposes, for his own political survival. A lot of families, for example, of the abductees, of the people who were held hostage, were protesting against him, saying that he's incapable of getting their near ones back alive and safe. Now, in the last few weeks, whether it's the pager attacks, the killing of the commanders of Hezbollah, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, and now, of course, Iran getting involved directly in this conflict, is the view different in Tel Aviv?
First of all, it is, but I don't share this view from the beginning. Unlikely, my friends, many of my friends, I don't think that Netanyahu is motivated only by his personal motivation. I think behind all his steps stands also an ideology, a very, very dangerous one, namely not believing in any kind of settlement with the Palestinians or with the Arabs, not believing in any kind of even negotiations with them on any kind of diplomacy. By the end of the day, this man believes only in living on the sword and only the Israeli armed forces as the only guarantee for Israel. Now, in this framework, Netanyahu sees now, and his government sees now, a huge opportunity to end once and for all, as they say it, once and for all will crash Hamas, once and for all will crash Hezbollah, and maybe once and for all will crash Iran. This is obviously a fantasy which will never be achieved, but I think this motivates him now, and he might even be in a hubris now, because on one hand, in the polls, he's doing better. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there are those military successes which lead to nowhere. But people like successes like this.
So let me ask Yossi Beilin that. Do you agree with Gideon Levy's view that perhaps because of the events of the last month or so, certainly the last couple of weeks, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu might be tempted to think that this is the opportune moment to not just secure the Israeli citizens from the threats of Hamas and Hezbollah, that's one part of it, and that's the stated objective of this war when it began on the 8th of October, but he possibly sees this moment to try and realign the balance of power in the Middle East if he were to land a debilitating blow on the Iranian regime?
Well, the question is whether such a reshuffle in the region demands another war, or demands more blood and sacrifices on all the parties. Why should we do that? I mean, I would like to see a reshuffle in the region. Mm-hmm. I would like to see a situation whereby Hezbollah is implementing the UN resolution of 2006, the resolution 1701, which it actually acquiesces to it then. This is not too ambitious. And also the agreement, the Taif agreement of 1989, which said very clearly that all the militias will hand over their ammunition to the government of Lebanon, which is regretfully a very weak one. And it is an interest of all those who believe in peace to strengthen the government of Lebanon.
Okay, let me
If
ask
this is
Michael
possible,
Rubin. Michael Rubin,
then, yeah, I
is
think-
this a pipe dream, or is this, as Naftali Bennett, the former Prime Minister of Israel, put it, a historic 50-year opportunity that Israel's got to once and for all rebalance and realign the forces at play in the Middle East? Is regime change in Tehran a pipe dream or a reality that's very much within the realm of achievable?
The first point is, let's not forget, this is a war that was imposed on Israel. There are no direct grievances between Iran and Israel. It's ideological on the part of the Ayatollahs. Now, to answer your question directly, Joe Biden is standing by Israel. Israel feels it's going to get criticized no matter what it does. The expression in for a penny, in for a pound. The difference is that Kamala Harris, should she become president, is more beholden to a progressive base, which is hostile to Israel. So there's a calculation going on that Israel's going to get criticized no matter what it does. It might as well try to do the job as completely as possible. But there's a ticking clock that after January 20th, it might not have these freedoms of operation.
So you buy the view that Netanyahu is sort of racing against the clock to do whatever his objectives are. Of course, it started with neutralizing Hamas. And then, of course, there was getting the hostages back. And then in the last few weeks and months, it's been about resettling the northern populations. And now here is an opportunity for him to try and rebalance or realign the forces at play in the wider Middle East. If that means change of regime or change of guard in Tehran, then so be it. If that means putting back Iran's nuclear program by 10 years, then so be it. He's got basically between now and the 20th of January to do that. And Iran is playing the opposite game, which is they're playing for time.
Yes, I absolutely think that is correct. At the same time, make no mistake, this isn't simply about Benjamin Netanyahu and his calculations. What is often misunderstood in Washington is that there's broad consensus among Israel's security apparatus about how to deal with the threats, the existential threats that Israel faces. If only one or two missiles get through each of these barrages, it's a game changer if they have biological, chemical, or radiological warheads. That's why Israel can't afford to celebrate its interception abilities.
So let me also ask Brigadier General Kuper Wassar, because today the Foreign Minister of Israel put out a pretty terse statement blacklisting the United Nations chief, saying he's declared the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres as a persona non grata in Israel and banned him from entering the country. Anyone who cannot condemn Iran's heinous attack, as almost every country in the world has done, does not deserve to step foot on Israeli soil. If you are not willing to bring in the international community, the United Nations, and clearly as the previous speaker said, Mr. Netanyahu sees a lame duck White House, a lame duck Biden presidency to achieve whatever objectives he wants to achieve, then all this talk of ceasefire, getting the abductees back, all of this, falls on deaf ears because clearly Mr. Netanyahu is playing to his own tune.
Well, the goal of Israel is to take care of so many challenges it faces, and you mentioned them. We have to find a way to bring back the people that had to evacuate their homes in the north. We have to find a way to bring back the hostages that are held by Hamas. But we also have to find a way to deal with the threat Iran poses to us. We have to understand all the weapons that are being shot at us from Lebanon were provided by Iran. All the capabilities of Hamas were provided by Iran. So it's a war against Iran, and the best way to deal with such a war is to take care of the head of the snake in this case. And this is the Iranian regime, and this is the Iranian nuclear project that is going to give the Iranian regime a shield that would then make it very difficult to take care of it.
Let me ask Professor Izadi from the Tehran University, are you ready to deal with the consequences of whatever action Israel might take and it might deem fit to protect its own people and to be seen as responding to what happened last night? What would be the worst case scenario for Tehran? Would it be the nuclear facilities being targeted and thereby pushing back Iran's ability to enrich uranium to weapons grade and eventually make her nuclear weapon? Would it be a change of regime? I did allude to the video clip that was put out by Mr. Netanyahu a couple of nights ago, where he spoke directly to the Iranian people and said they deserve better politically. Which would be the most debilitating as far as Iran is concerned in terms of consequences of Israel's actions?
You know, when your country is hit repeatedly, what you are afraid of is the idea that the other side doesn't see any pain and they continue this type of aggression. That is what you're afraid of. You don't want to have this feeling on the other side that we can kill anybody in Iran, we can hit people in Iran, we can kill more children in Gaza, we can kill more children in Lebanon, and nothing happens to us. That is the real fear. And that fear was addressed last night, and I think the other side got the message.
Mr. Balin, do you agree that the other side got the message? That's the word from Mr. Izadi. But more than getting the message, it's now about what Israel is going to do. And again, around the table, around this panel, it seems to be that the most damaging thing to inflict on Iran would be to set its nuclear program back, because they are looking at, crossing the Rubicon as some kind of a leveler of the asymmetry of defense capabilities between Tehran and Tel Aviv. The question, though, is that what Israel wants? Does it have the capability to do that on its own, or does it need to rely on the Americans? And in case the Americans come in, then you're pretty much looking at a wider regional war, one which the Biden presidency and President Biden himself has been saying day in and day out they want to avoid.
Well, there is no question that the potential nuclear power of Iran is a very, very significant threat on Israel, and even only because they say so, the Iranians. Mm-hmm. They see us as their enemy, although it doesn't have to be the case. I mean, we had very good relations with Iran before the revolution, and if it is possible to prevent this Iran from becoming a nuclear power, it is very important for us. But what I'm trying to say is that there is also another way to do that, perhaps, and this is through an agreement. And to have another clash with Iran will lead us nowhere.
So, where does that agreement stand? Michael Rubin has been following that, the JCPOA. When Trump was president, he pulled out of the JCPOA. And ever since, even when the Democrats have been in office, there has not been any sincere or earnest attempt to try and negotiate with the Iranians in a way to try and curtail their nuclear program. Has there? Mr. Rubin?
Okay. Well, first of all, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action wasn't a treaty, and it was enshrined in UN Security Council Resolution 2231, so it still applies. Even putting that aside, Iran is still party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action didn't excuse Iran from those. But the real problem with the 2015 nuclear deal was it had a sunset clause on it. So if there was renegotiation now, you would be joining a treaty that's already expired. The problem with the way the United States negotiated this in 2015 is we gave all of our concessions up front. So really, there's nothing for which the United States can actually negotiate moving forward. I saw Iranian President Pezeshkian at the United Nations, and this was very, very clear as a conclusion on the part of the Iranians. I don't see that there's a real interest from Iran moving forward on this.
Okay, if there were to be a conventional war, before I go back to Gideon Levy, if there were to be a conventional war between Iran and Israel, and we haven't seen one, certainly not in the recent past, this is how it stacks up. The armed forces, the standing army of Israel is 750,000. Iran is 1.2 million. The defense budget for Israel is 27.5 billion. For Iran, it's at a third of that, at 9 billion. The number of combat aircraft, Israel has 450, Iran has 330. Naval ships, Israel has 64, Iran has 260 of them. Tanks, Israel has 3,500 and Iran has 1,600. I mean, this will be a fight to death. This will be a fight to mutual destruction, perhaps mutual oblivion, Gideon Levy. What can countries, not just Israel and Iran, but countries around the region, what can the United States stop to prevent this conventional war from breaking out between Iran and Israel? Because if Israel is going to respond, as is the case, most likely it is going to respond for what happened yesterday, then we're pretty much going up the escalatory ladder.
The United States could have done so many things 1 year ago, not now. The United States is playing a very strange game. On one hand, President Biden speaks all the time and begs Israel to stop the war, first of all, in Gaza. And in the same time, he supplies Israel with unlimited and unconditioned arms and ammunition, which leaves Israel with total freedom to do whatever it wants and ignore the advices or the request of the American administration. Now it's much harder to stop it. But if the United States would have liked to stop this war in Gaza first, it could have done it within days. But the United States was playing a very, very strange game, hollow declarations and full support to Israel. And in those circumstances, why would Israel stop the war? Why would Israel listen to the Americans? They supply the weapons, they supply the ammunition, and we go on. And the White House is asking requests, very nice of the White House, but it's totally hollow.
But the view also seems to be, before I get Michael Rubin to weigh in on this, Mr. Levy, is that there is precious little leverage that this presidency, which is pretty much in its final few months, has on Israel. And more importantly, the view in the Beltway is also that whether there's a Republican in the White House or a Democrat in the White House, they have to be seen as fully backing Israel. They don't have a choice in that regard.
I don't agree. I totally don't agree. They have a leverage. They are never using it. They had it in the past. They never use it. They always play this double game, this hypocrisy of calling Israel to restrain and doing anything possible to leave Israel go wild. This was the case also in Gaza and now in Lebanon. I'll give you just one example. Mm-hmm. The Americans really almost threatened Israel not to penetrate to Rafah in Gaza.
Yep.
Okay, so they did. Israel penetrated Rafah, totally ignored the Americans, and nothing happened. The weapons continue to stream to Israel. So why would Israel listen to the United States?
Mr. Rubin, is there a plausible explanation, given, what we've seen in college campuses, for example, in the U.S. over the summer and even in some parts of the fall? Why isn't the Biden administration putting more pressure on Israel? Last I checked, the Senate did sanction a $14 billion weapons package for Israel.
First of all, the lesson here is that both Iran and Israel have agency. The United States doesn't control the world. That's point one. Point two, the Americans are always going to defer to democracies because they represent the will of the people. Point three, Israel has been attacked consistently by terrorist groups supported by Iran that have a goal to existentially wipe Israel off the map. But when it comes to your discussion about how the two militaries match up, it's a bit of a straw man. Israel and Iran aren't going to get into tank warfare. They're too far away. And let's not forget, 90% of Iran's oil is exported through the Karg oil terminal. So Israel doesn't need to destroy all Iran's tanks or jet aircraft. It only has to destroy the facility which provides the fuel or the income for the Islamic Republic.
But do you think if Israel were to take such an action, whether it is attacking its oil facilities, attacking its nuclear facilities, surely Iran is also going to view that as escalatory and respond? The statement that the IRGC put out and what the Iranian president put out is they are standing down for now. If there were to be a breach of their sovereignty, they wouldn't hesitate to attack again.
The way I would look at this is there tends to be an assumption that regimes have staying power. We've seen that the legitimacy of the Islamic Republic isn't actually there. We saw this with the Woman Life Freedom Movement. But let's use another analogy. Did the Khmer Rouge cease to exist after Vietnam dealt it a military blow? Absolutely. Iran realizes the supreme leader is 85 years old. He's had cancer twice. He's partially paralyzed from a 1981 assassination attempt. It's not clear that there's going to be a smooth transition there. The people have voiced their will against Iran. What the Israelis hope is that they can do enough damage to the Islamic Republic without actually antagonizing the Iranian people, who we've said before are natural allies to Israel.
But let me ask Brigadier General Kuprabasar, I mean, is something like this possible? Yes, in the 20th century, you could talk about when the Cold War was going on, you could talk about regime change and so on and so forth. I mean, look at what's happened between Russia and Ukraine. That war is now going to enter its third year in the next couple of months. This idea that somehow Israel or even the United States, the foremost superpower in the world, has these magical powers to change what is a fortified regime. It's been in power for the last, God knows, 40, 50 years now. Is that even possible? And what do you make of what Prime Minister Netanyahu was trying to do by putting out that video message a couple of nights ago, speaking directly to the Iranian people? There is, again, as Mr. Rubin said, and I'm going to borrow his phrase, the assumption that the Iranian people want to get rid of this regime. Maybe some of them do, but is there enough of a critical mass that wants to get rid of the Ayatollahs?
Well, first of all, I think that there is a critical mass of Iranians that want to get rid of this regime. They are suffering under this regime. This regime executes people for criticizing the regime. It's a terrible place to live in. And unlike what Mr. Izzadi said, I think that many Iranians were supporting Israel and celebrating Israel's activities against Nasrallah, and not celebrating the attacks against Israel. And yes, we hope that the people of Iran will change the regime. We don't consider that something that we can do by ourselves. And we have, therefore, to make sure that we cut the capabilities of this dangerous Iranian regime, because we cannot change the regime. The changing of the regime is a task for the Iranian people. And that's why we need to take care of the Iranian nuclear project, because we cannot allow. Look how dangerous the Iranian regime is without the nuclear weapon. Just imagine what kind of threat they're going to pose if they're going to have a nuclear weapon. That's why we have to make sure that they don't have the capability to produce a nuclear weapon. And that's the task of Israel and the West, because the threat is not only for Israel. The threat is for the entire world. Okay. And that's why we are expecting cooperation with the United States, and they're not supporting us because of our blue eyes. They're supporting us because they understand that their interests and their values are shared with us, and that's why they need to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon.
I'll give Mr. Levy the final word, because I have to wrap up. I'm getting a piece of breaking news as well. Mr. Levy, there used to be a time when the principal sort of clash in the Middle East was between Israel and the Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman, etc. Today, given the dramatic events that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, we've not seen much of a protest or a condemnation from any of these countries, even after Hassan Nasrallah was killed, even after what happened yesterday. Do they have a vested interest in Israel being able to, I mean, I know some people think it's a pipe dream, this whole business of regime change, but is that because these Gulf Arab states also want to see Iran cut down to size, and if Israel is able to do it with American help or without American help, then they have a vested interest in seeing that through?
No doubt. I mean, Iran is threatening those countries no less than Israel, and the regimes in those countries are in threat from Iran. But don't get wrong. I mean, the good relations with the Gulf, which is a strategic asset, and Israel should be very, very happy about it. But as long as we don't touch the core issue, namely the Israeli occupation, as long as this is not solved, nothing will be solved in the Middle East, including relations with Iran. Israel is supplying enough reasons for all those countries to hate Israel, at least in the level of public opinion and society, civil societies. And as long as we continue with the occupation, nothing will be solved in the Middle East, even if we'll have the best relationship with Saudi Arabia and with Qatar and even with Bahrain. The main problem is still unsolved.
All right. I would tend to agree with you on that. This is the unfinished business in the Middle East, and until you can meaningfully move in that direction, no matter how much you normalize relations with, Saudi Arabia or Bahrain or Oman or whichever country there is in that region, I don't think you're going to fully solve the problems of the Middle East, or it's going to become a normal region of the world without all of these bombs and rockets and ballistic missiles flying around. Thank you very much to our wonderful panelists for joining us this evening and trying to put into perspective what happened, the gravity of what happened last night, what Iran did, and what may be the response options for Israel given what their strategic objectives are. At the end of the day, I think the critical question is, does Israel want to target and push back Iran's nuclear program by 5 or 10 or 15 years in a way that it is simply buying time? Because Iran, like I said, is playing the opposite game, which is it knows it's an inevitability that at some point it is going to get a nuclear weapon, or at least be able to produce one, and that will necessarily change the whole balance of power in the region. But we're getting a piece of breaking news, and I think this is important in the context of what's happened in the Middle East over the last few days. We're now getting word that Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had warned Hezbollah chief Saeed Hassan Nasrallah to flee Lebanon. This was just days before he was killed in the Israeli airstrike that happened last Friday. He's now deeply worried about the level of Israeli infiltration of senior government ranks in Tehran. Now remember, ever since he got news of Hassan Nasrallah's death, him being killed in an airstrike in Beirut, the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has gone into a secret place. No one, not even his closest inner circle, knows what this secret hiding place is. He's of course issued statements from these, even last night when the ballistic missile barrage happened. He's issued a statement saying that this is what they intend to do on the Zionist regime. But if indeed this is true, that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had warned the now dead Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah that his life was under threat, and is now worried about the level of Israeli infiltration in the highest ranks, in the highest echelons of the Iranian government, that is something that is noteworthy. That is something that we will keep an eye out on. Anand has more details on this. Anand, so this again sort of lays bare open some of the fears of a man whose regime has existed for the last 30-40 years, but is on very shaky ground now.
Zaka, and to our viewers, doesn't this echo what Ahmadinejad had said just the other day, where he said that the IRGC itself may have been infiltrated by the Israelis? And someone like Ahmadinejad to come out and say that there has been deep infiltration into the Iranian ranks is not something which should be taken out of the ordinary. Now with the Khamenei himself worried that there is infiltration within the Iranian ranks, this is writ large. The other thing is, who got to know? How is it that an Israeli shell company got the purchase order to buy those pagers, which ended up with not just the Hezbollah but also ambassadors and envoys, official envoys of Iran had some of those pagers on their person. So clearly it had to be infiltrated. So at various levels, right, even to know the exact location of Nasrallah, at all points in time, it all points to the fact that the Israelis have embedded themselves deeply into the Iranian state. And Ayatollah Khamenei clearly voicing those concerns.
All right. We've also got an update from the IDF chief, General Herzog Haveri, who has now said that Israel will respond at a time and place of its choosing. And more importantly, he's also said that Israel has the ability to hit at any part of the Middle East. So he's not necessarily saying that this will be a direct attack on Iranian territory. This could very well be on an Iranian asset or an Iranian mission in any part of the Middle East, much like what we saw back in April when the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus in Syria was targeted, and that of course led to the 300-odd projectiles being set off from Tehran into Tel Aviv, into Israeli airspace. So this could well be an attack outside of Iranian territory, but certainly looking at Iranian assets. Perhaps an attack on one of the higher commanders of the IRGC, we don't know. But he has said that yes, Israel will respond, it will be seen as responding, and it will respond at a time and place of its choosing, including at any part of the Middle East. We'll take a quick break here on the program. Today is the 2nd of October. It is exactly 10 years since the launch of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. How the cleanliness drive has changed not just the streets and roads across the country, but also the mindset of cleanliness amongst Indian people. That coming up right on the other side of this quick break.
At L'Oréal Group. गली गली और मोहल्ला हो हल्ला. This melody has been creating euphoria for cleanliness in the lanes and bylanes of Indore for the past 8 years. It was euphoria at first, now it's a sense of pride.
वो लोग मुझे बोलते हैं कि मतलब मेरे घर वाले उधर के सब जो मेरे रिलेटिव्स हैं कि आप तो मतलब शहर है नंबर 1 स्वच्छता के लिए, आप उधर की बहू हो करके. हाँ अच्छा लगता है. हाँ बहुत अच्छा लगता है.
The increased level of awareness for cleanliness is visible on the streets of Indore. Civic responsibility of every citizen is evident.
जहाँ भी कुछ दिखता है कूड़ा करकट वगैरह तो हम लोग डस्टबिन में डाल देते हैं और अवेयर करते हैं लोगों को भी कि आप लोग भी डालें. कहीं भी कुछ लगता है तो हम बाहर नहीं डालते हैं, जैसे एज ए ह्यूमन नेचर सब बाहर डाल देते हैं या कहीं भी डाल देते हैं. कुछ पन्नी हो गया कुछ भी हो गया, जैसे अभी फिलहाल कुछ पानी की बोतल हो गई पी और फिर फेंक दी, तो वो उसके लिए अवेयर करते हैं लोगों को क्योंकि वी आर इंदौरी.
कॉरपोरेशन के ऑफिसर्स हों, हमारे सफाई मित्र हों, जनप्रतिनिधि हों और यहाँ की जनता हो, यहाँ की मीडिया हो, सभी एक ही मिशन पे काम करते हैं जिसका लक्ष्य होता है इंदौर को नंबर 1 बनाना. और मुझे लगता है कि वही एक चीज है जो इंदौर को सबसे अलग करती है.
Here's how the administration ensures the Rajwada in Indore is spick and span.
Fact, these mechanized sweeping machines have been doing wonders in Indore for last 7 years. These machines start operation late in the night when you plan to sleep, and when you wake up you find roads in this cleanest city as clean as your veranda.
Street food is quintessential to the city of Indore, but while the customers savor that delicious poha and jalebi, they ensure the streets remain clean.
Getting to the top is one thing, but remaining on the top for continuous 7 years is another. And very serious efforts have been taken by Indore citizens to remain on the top. And one thing is disposable free market. Look at these plates. There is no disposable at all. आपकी दुकान पे तो डिस्पोजेबल होते ही नहीं है, पूरे मार्केट में 56 दुकान.
हाँ जी सर, हम लोगों ने तो बहुत सालों से इसी में चलाते हैं हम प्लेटों में स्टील वाली, क्योंकि डिस्पोजल में जैसे खाना वाना चिपका रहता कागज में तो बहुत गंदगी फैलाता था.
सूखा कचरा निकालेंगे ही नहीं तो सेग्रीगेशन की जरूरत ही ना होगी. क्रॉकरी का इस्तेमाल करें, और क्रॉकरी का इस्तेमाल करना हमारे लिए इकोनॉमिकल भी फायदे में रहा, क्योंकि जो हम लोग प्लेट्स यूज कर रहे थे वो टोटली लॉस ही था. पर हम अगर क्रॉकरी को यूज कर रहे हैं तो धो के उसको फिर से यूज कर रहे हैं.
एक तो ये भी कि हाँ हाइजीन मेंटेन है, वॉशेबल है और पोल्यूशन भी इतना नहीं फैल रहा है, तो हाँ इट्स बेटर.
Another feather to the cap of the cleanest city is the bio-CNG plant set up by Municipal Corporation 2 years ago. Indore city, with a population of nearly 40 lakh, produces over 1,000 ton garbage. This bio-CNG plant uses 550 tons of wet garbage per day and produces clean fuel to run 400 city buses. Apart from generating organic fertilizer, generating 2.42 crore rupees per annum.
This bio-CNG plant in Indore is a classic example how you can create wealth out of waste. Here you can see how Indore Municipal Corporation is using wet garbage for their energy purpose.
Indore aims to regain the glory of Shab-e Malwa and retain the coveted distinction of being the cleanest city of India for the 8th time. With VJ Sharad Kapoor in Indore, Manoj Sharma for CNN News 18.
Two states at the crossroads of change. In Jammu and Kashmir, the stakes have never been higher. Will the promise of peace and progress prevail? In Haryana, as the fight for power intensifies, will alliances and caste equations shape the future? As the battle for states intensifies, tracking every twist, every turn and every key moment. Only on Battle for the States.
Viewers, like Pakistan bleeds India by 1,000 cuts using terror proxies, Iran has ring-fenced Israel with genocidal jihadis to bleed it mercilessly. Iran was happy to sponsor this low-intensity, debilitating war against Israel using Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and several other sociopaths. Why bark after all when you have lapdogs to do the nipping? But now, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has changed the rules of the game. Iran has ended the proxy war. In an impulsive escalation, Iran has struck Israel directly. Tehran has fixed a little under 200 missiles at Tel Aviv. They fixed them and then, viewers, they fired at them. Most were blunted by Israel's famed Iron Dome, but some alarmingly still got in, touching down in the vicinity of the Mossad headquarters. 3 Israeli military bases in several public areas